Hey everybody, it's Scott. Thanks for joining me. You're all welcome as well. I always say that. So everyone's welcome. I hope that I'm giving you some good insights and things with the videos I produce. So today I'm going to change it up a little bit. I have a book that I want to discuss, just a kind of a book review. Something that I haven't really seen anyone else review out there, and kind of deals with some shadowy topics. So if you're a Christian, you might find this fascinating, or you might find it blasphemous. If you are a pagan, you might find this fascinating. You might find it blasphemous. I think it has the opportunity to really bend people's paradigms and bend their thoughts, regardless of a faith tradition or even a science tradition. The book that I just finished reading, I picked up a few months ago, at ironically like a metaphysical bookstore. It's called The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim. The subtitle is The Untold Story of Fallen Angels, Giants on the Earth, and Their Extraterrestrial Origins. And it's by Scott Allen Roberts. Wow. So even like the title is just like compelling. So Scott Roberts talks about this. He is very scholarly throughout the book, and really gets into this topic of the Nephilim. The Nephilim were the offspring of like the fallen angels, the angels that came to Earth, who came and impregnated earthly women, and so then their offspring gave rise to this giant race, or this hybridized race of what we call the Nephilim in the Bible. He talks about a lot of different books, like the book of Enoch and Genesis, and some of the other places in other apocryphal texts that were taken out of the Bible, some that are still in the Catholic Bible. Sort of shows the parallels of how the whole pre-Jesus story talks about the Nephilim. And he links this story of the Nephilim to the story of Noah and the ark and the great flood, based on how the wickedness of the world. So he even goes into like the whole ideas of his theories on why modern Christianity kind of glosses over this topic of the Nephilim. Um, there's a great chapter in here about Moses. He talks about Moses' Egyptian origins, and talks really in a context of how you can understand Moses' upbringing, how he grew up, what the conditions were, and how he became a leader of the Hebrew people. And how it wasn't a coincidence necessarily. There was a societal structure that led him to be the Hebrew leader, based on his upbringing as, kind of the adopted offspring of Egyptians. So that intertwining, and then he goes in to explain some of the things about what we hear in Moses' first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, um, you know, and a lot of the laws that were given throughout Deuteronomy, Leviticus, and having to do with having to separate from the culture and such the proliferation of this Nephilim hybrid race, and the behaviors that they exhibited and how they scorched the earth, how they were riotous, and there was a total underlying um, tone of a lot of sexual assault going on that crossed all boundaries and all genders. That it's no wonder that modern day Christianity wanted to turn this into a nice little story of Noah and the animals and the ark and the flood and the wickedness of the earth, and just sort of like scoot right on through that. Let's get right on through that. And then the rainbow saying that I'll never flood the earth again, and the only descendants that lived were those that were on the ark with Noah. Well, a lot of the other apocryphal texts and other texts of the time also talk about this great deluge and this great flood that happened on the earth. So there's enough textual evidence to talk about this as a spiritual concept across religions, not just what we know as Christianity today. So very interesting stories that he makes about the Nephilim. There's also some information in the book about the council of certain beings. He talks about Elohim and other angels and the sons of God, or other pluralities of God as a concept, and that in the ancient Sumerian times, and touches a little bit into the Zechariah Sitchin theories of like things about the Watchers, which was another alien race that came down to kind of observe and to kind of be a balancing force for this rise and fall of these fallen angels and Nephilim. And also this council that one time that is alluded to in biblical and other texts of, not only was it just God, but there was a plurality of a council that would govern the earth on a spiritual plane. So whatever you believe, this is a very fascinating paradigm shifting book. The things that I got out of it mostly were that when we think about law in the time of the Pentateuch, the Moses writing the law, do you remember the movie from the 70s, Moses the Lawgiver? It kind of like put that in perspective to me, because if we can just suspend our belief for a moment, if we believe that there was a hybridized race of people, these giant race that came down, ravaged the earth, ravaged women, engaged in horrible sexual assault practices, what he calls divination. I mean, they never had tarot cards back then, but divination was another form of like just, becoming God to them. And so it's no wonder that you would want to create laws for your chosen people, for the Hebrews, for God's chosen people. And because they need to differentiate themselves from all this evil from what they were experiencing. So he even goes into this talking about the Nephilim today. There's some really things that I hear in conservative circles about that, in spirit form or physical form, the Nephilim may still be in existence today, or their spirit form may be in existence today. When we talk about embodiments of ghosts or relatives, he goes on to say in one of the last chapters, we never really know who we're talking to, do we? So many of us want to believe too that, when I have a dream from an ancestor or a relative, this is really them, and their spirit is guiding me. And I think there's nothing wrong with that idea. Some Christian circles, more conservative circles, and he kind of alluded to this too, kind of believe that these are evil, wicked demons that could be impersonating our relatives, because according to the theology that they believe, you believe in Jesus as the Son of God, and it's the gateway to go into heaven. When you're dead, you go to heaven. You don't come back. When you're dead, you're in heaven, and there's no reincarnation, according to that theology. And so that leads some people to believe that any encounter with ghosts or other interdimensional guides could be something demonic or of a fallen nature, based on this theology of belief or historical account or biblical account. I'm not quite sure where I am on that realm. I am kind of agnostic when it comes to spirit beings that visit us. I do believe that there are some that are very negative energies, and they're not here for our best purposes. I do believe that it's possible that some are very helpful. And discernment is the biggest thing. So we get talking about interdimensional beings and possible aliens and angels and spirit visitations. I know that can cause a lot of fear in people. So because we really don't know, we have our beliefs to go on, and we have what comes to us in meditation and the feelings we have. So is it possible that these are demonic presences that are impersonating our relatives or spirit beings? Sure, it's possible. Is it possible that there are interdimensional beings coming in and trying to help us and move us along in society and our culture, and also as beings on this planet? Sure. So that's a whole nother topic that I'll go into in another video, but there are some biblical and spiritual Christian and pre-Christian, Judeo-Christian foundations for a lot of belief in, things like angels, demons, Nephilim, giant races. Some people believe that our idea of Sasquatch or Bigfoot is a descendant or a survivor of this Nephilim hybrid race. So there's even a channel out there, I'm not going to mention names on YouTube, but you can search for it, where a man talks to or claims to speak to a Sasquatch creature whose who calls himself Nepatia, which is very close to the term Nephilim. So, be that as it may, is it a possibility? Sure. I don't necessarily think that we need to be totally afraid of this. I think it's good to arm ourselves with knowledge, beliefs, get an idea of what people are thinking. All in all, I loved the book. The first half of the book was the best. He talks about Noah and theories about the Nephilim and, the rise and fall of the Nephilim. Then the second half of the book was a little more repetitive. Talks about Constantine, and a lot of it got into a lot of biblical quoting. Lots of biblical quoting in here. So if that's a trigger for you, you probably don't want this book. But if you find it fascinating from a historical point of view, and you've read the Bible a few times, or know enough Bible knowledge, some of this kind of like is, ooh, I never really thought of it that way. So really great book. I recommend it for folks who are Christian believers, most of all, or also folks who are really into historical ideas about alien hybrid races, or who've learned about this Nephilim phenomenon. I think this is a good body of work to, especially a well-researched body of work about Nephilim and history of, if you get into ancient aliens and things like that, he goes a lot deeper than the whole ancient alien concept that's more Hollywood and, seeks to draw you in with the imagery and suspense. So, but this is well researched, and so I would recommend it if you are really curious about it. Again, it's not for the faint of heart, but it is something that I read recently, and I just wanted to share this with you. I know I've talked about Christianity and tarot and divination and the law. This kind of exploded the law for me. So that's what I take away from it. This kind of like really helped me put into perspective what might be a possible reason for why we have such this stark contrast between the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, with all the law and all of the, control. And I had questions too about Moses in my mind, like, wandering in the desert for 40 years, and what was he doing, and how he came from this Egyptian heritage, and then just tying that in with like some Egyptian history and cryptology and the pyramids and the kings and all of that. So fascinating to me, not light reading, but again, I wanted to show this to you, something I've been reading. So pick it up if you really are interested in that topic. So I'll talk about interdimensional beings and things like that in a later video. Hybridized beings, interdimensional beings. But if you're interested in what some scholars are thinking of as far as like biblical, historical, Christian and pre-Christian philosophies about, there are ancient ideas that were planted in these ancient historical texts that that do support this idea of alien races or fallen angel races and hybrid races that were dwelling on Earth. So we have the story of David and Goliath, and Goliath was the offspring of some of the last known, I guess, Nephilim giant races there, and and he became king after slaying Goliath. So that's pretty significant. You've got to really think that, oh, this is not just a man who was a giant. He was like a warrior. Goliath was known as a warrior. And if you're just a giant human, what we know about them today is that if you're a giant human, your bones start to decay and become brittle, and as you age, you have a shorter lifespan and things like that. So he goes into that kind of stuff in the book too. But how Goliath was vital till his death, warrior for 40 years. So, yeah, really interesting book. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm not telling you what to not believe. I don't want you to stay up and have bad dreams about this tonight or be triggered. But really good book. Pick it up. I think it's always fun to like read kind of something that's a little bit off of your comfort zone, and just to get the knowledge, get the interpretation of that. It's probably the more darker side of this idea of alien beings and fallen angels and the history, because we have seen giant skulls, we've seen giant bones that have been uncovered. You can go to any Barnes and Noble and go to the New Age or metaphysical section. You can find like books like The Giant Aliens That Roamed the Earth, or Giant Bones, or Giant Race stuff. You can find all that stuff, and you can do newspaper research, and you can find that. One time I read a newspaper article that said, 10-foot tall man's bones sent to the Minnesota Historical Society, and then follow up, they have no such bones. So just interesting stuff like that happens. So is it a conspiracy? I don't know. Do these things disappear from our consciousness? Of course. I mean, that's a controlling feature of the control mechanisms of our society. Wanting to keep certain things in our consciousness and wanting to take things out as a measure for keeping a society under control, or dispensing knowledge. That's another topic too. So how do we take back this knowledge and self-disclose these secrets for ourselves? And who do we believe? Who do we discern this from? But I do believe there's an energy about there are things that have always been suppressed: knowledge, history, and it's up to us to kind of uncover that, or at least to read about it, or at least wonder, ask the questions. Asking the questions, I think, is the most important thing. Even if we never really get the answer, that's the most important thing, because then that helps us discern other questions we have going on in the world today. Like, why is this the way it is today? So, all right, that was a big tangent, but if you're so interested, the book is The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim by Scott Allen Roberts. It's published by New Page Books. So look for it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whatever you like. I found this at a metaphysical bookshop. Pick it up if you like, or pass on it if you don't think this is something up your alley. So I'll talk about some other books along this line eventually, I'm sure. It's kind of a fascinating topic for me, this idea of, extraterrestrial origins of beings and things throughout history, things that we may not have explained very well in our society right now. So, hope you like the video. Again, use your own judgment, your own discernment. and keep searching for your own truth, whatever you find to believe and integrate into your own, sacred library of knowledge or questions. I believe questions are knowledge as well. So have a very good night. Love you all. Namaste.